Paul George's gruesome injury. Let's move on to USA Hoops. So there's been a debate about whether or not professionals should be playing in these international tournaments because of the injury factor. Obviously, Mark Cuban was pretty outspoken when he talked about, and he's been on the record going back several years, a decade even, saying that the NBA should create their own World Cup of basketball to control and at least profit from these international competitions instead of the Olympics and these FIBA events. Larry Bird, on the other hand, says this is an extremely unfortunate injury that occurred on a highly visible stage. Could have occurred anytime, anywhere. Obviously, these players play in the offseason somewhere, whether it's Berry Farm or pickup games or summer leagues. What sort of side do you fall on, Brandon? If you had to choose one, do you see any things changing because of this injury as far as the participation in these international events?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you look at, it's kind of ironic how the narrative went as far as you looking at Derrick Rose and saying, first, well, why are you playing in this when you haven't been playing with your team?
Right.
Then in the beginning of the game, he looks great, and people are like, oh, it was good to have this, against the best players, see how you're going to look, and then Paul George goes down. I think you kind of have different tiers, like the LeBrons of the world. He's already won a gold medal, obviously. I don't think he really gains anything by being in that. But then you look at the John Walls, the Bradley Beals. Like, they look at this as something to prove that, hey, I belong with the best of the best. So I want to be invited. I want to play. So, again, it's kind of two camps. And also that goes with, I feel like Cuban and Larry Bird are saying different things, but towards the same end as far as Mark Cuban. I don't know him, obviously, but I don't think his argument is more so for Paul George and his safety as the bottom line of the teams and the NBA. And Larry Bird obviously is concerned about Paul George, but he's thinking about his team as well. Like, I just lost my best player. So they're both, at the end of the day, it's about the Pacers and what they can do, but Paul George is kind of lost in that mix of just kind of, and that goes to, again, if you use college players, it's kind of like these guys are just pawns in the bottom line. Do they need to be compensated? I don't know.
Scott, do you see this as the fact that Beal and Wall were cut as a net win for Wizards fans because it takes the injury factor out of play for them?
I guess not. I think it's a net win because they had the experience of being on that stage and playing against guys who are going to go on to the World Cup and play in the Olympics. And next time they try out, I think they'll be in a better situation. Because I think it does go back to the point of if they're not playing there, they are going to be playing somewhere. And this was a freak injury, and it could have happened at Berry Farms. It happened to happen on a big stage in front of a lot of people. But yeah, I think guys are going to play during the summer, whether it's on the Olympic circuit or at home. So,
Dan, if you're Ernie Grenfeld, what are you telling the Wizards players next year?
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned Berry Farm, both of you mentioned it. Bradley Beal was there playing last night. I mean, I would assume that with no trainers around and like blacktop and guys who don't really have anything to lose by going against Bradley Beal, the injury risk I would assume would be higher there. Obviously, they're not quite a high level of play, but I mean, it stinks. But these guys play preseason games. We talk about the regular season being 82 games long and not really mattering. What does a preseason NBA game matter? And if something happens there, would it be any more? Yeah, the All-Star game, the dunk contest.
It's a little less
okay, but
intense
would you
than
feel
the
any?
All-Star game.
Would
But
you
yeah,
feel any
sure.
better if your guy went down in a preseason NBA game than this?
Right.
I mean, people talk about the goal about. You'd rather win an NBA championship than your resume is going to be defined by an NBA championship more than a gold medal, which is true. But any of these competitions have sort of preliminary stages that just don't matter. And unless you're just going to wipe them all off and say they'll only play in the playoffs and in the Olympic competition, then guys sometimes are going to get hurt in meaningless games.
Do you see it having a tangible effect going forward on the participation?
I can see a big star, a couple big stars looking at that and saying, I don't want to do it, but I don't think the majority will.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've already seen, I guess, with some guys who are in contract years or coming off injury, not Rose, obviously,
Right.
who have shied away from it. But no, I don't think this one injury will have any real big effect.
If it was like my favorite player's health at stake, I would much rather him play in a USA preliminary game than an NFL preseason game, for sure.
Yeah, at least you're going to get
Yeah,
better
that's a separate debate. That's an
practice,
interesting thought. There's meaningless games in just about every sport.
Yeah.